Hey, I'm Bryan Fenley, and you have reached the Honest Something podcast, a sports media platform where it's different than any other sports media podcast out there. And I'm not just saying that. Trust me, there's a lot of them out there. This one differs from all of them because we don't just talk about what's happening in the world of sports media right now or talk just work. We're going beyond that. There are sides to my guest today that even his closest coworkers at ESPN don't even know. And that's the joy and excitement of this conversation platform. Kevin Lopes is my guest today, Vice President at ESPN, working in sports business development and innovation. A neat conversation. And before we get started, a little background on me. I have called volleyball on ESPN as recently as a year ago on ESPNU. Also call other sports for other networks. All right, here is my conversation with Kevin. And don't forget to subscribe. You know, we all have thought about time travel. And if there was somebody on this earth that can look ahead in time, can sort of time travel himself based upon what he's done in the technology space with ESPN, predicting things would happen before they do. He's got an eye for being a forward thinker. It would be my guest today, Kevin Lopes, who is Vice President, Sports Business Development and Innovation at ESPN, the pride of the University of Rhode Island. We're
That's
going to
right.
share his story. Yeah, you know it. We're going to share his story on the Honest Something podcast. I'm Bryan Fenley, where I bring on a bunch of ESPNers, and we talk about work stuff, but there's the personal side as well, which I think that deserves to be highlighted as well, and learning the full story behind someone. And Kevin, I know that I've had a ton of your colleagues on. Thanks for coming on yourself, man. Looking forward to the chat.
No, appreciate it. I've seen a ton of ESPN colleagues here, so I had to get in on the action. So thanks for having me.
It's an honor to have you. And when you were at Rhode Island, you were in track and field, and obviously very good at what you were doing. And you're very good at what you're doing now in the workspace. But what about what you do now? Unlike track and field, is not a race.
Yeah, I mean, and there's certain parts of innovation that is a race, right? Because we certainly want to get out in front of our competition. Um, but you never quite know what's going to hit. Like in track and field, you kind of have a very clear beginning and an end. In innovation and business, you don't quite know if something's going to pan out until potentially years later. So you lose a little bit of that immediate celebratory at the end of it, but excited to do what I do now and humbled that I have an opportunity to do it here at ESPN.
How have you become so good at public speaking?
um, Honestly, it's been a lot of reps, and I'm actually shocked. I have a number of folks that work for me now. I think I have 17 employees, and I've got 23-year-old people that are really good at public speaking. And going back in time, I probably started to get more confident at it probably in like 2016, really, after I got enough reps at work. So I worked at ESPN for a number of years and always continually improved, now to the point where I actually enjoy sitting on stage talking in front of 1,000 people. But rewind, 10 years earlier in my career, it would have been mortifying for me to do it. But to answer your question, I get a lot of reps at it, and I enjoy talking to people. But I've got people who are employees that are fresh out of school or 1 or 2 years out, and their public speaking ability, compared to mine when I was fresh out, is night and day. So I think maybe they focused on it more in college, or they're just way more confident now than I used to be.
Well, and when you were in college, you were, if I'm not mistaken, Kevin, you were president of your student government. And I would think that that might involve a speech or two. What was the most persuasive speech, the proudest speech you ever made in college when you were addressing people as president?
Oh man, I think I was at the State House in Rhode Island probably in 2002, and there was some bill that the state wanted to tax students $200 a person for like police and fire. But students are already paying taxes through either their parents or through like the fees of the university, and so they were trying to tax students because they knew they wouldn't vote. Right? They didn't have political capital to serve any punishment, and so I went up there to represent the student body to fight against this tax against the student body. And there was one senator, his name was Senator Demiani, and he said, "Why should we listen to you if only like 1,200 people voted for you, right? And I said, Senator, you're from East Providence. How many people live in East Providence, and how many people voted for you? So you shouldn't look at a percentage of the student population based on the percentage of votes I've received as an indication of my ability to represent that constituency. Unlike, I'm assuming the percentage is probably higher than it is for your election as well. I think that was probably the best persuasive argument I had, and it probably gave me a lot of confidence. I was able to think quickly on my feet all the way back then. There's certain circumstances where you feel like you have the perfect response. If you could rewind time, you could nail it. There's a couple of times I felt like I nailed it in real time, and that was probably the first time I nailed it in real time.
But that wasn't the first time, I'm assuming, that you had stood up for yourself. When do you remember in your life, outside of work, maybe outside of school, at any stage of your life, where you first remember that moment where you really were able to stand up for yourself and take a stand on something?
Honestly, I've been really privileged. Both my parents were teachers. I grew up in a great middle class home. I didn't have to struggle for anything. I had a great public school education in high school, great, really public school education at the University of Rhode Island. There really wasn't, my life wasn't full of struggle and challenge that I had to make a name for myself. I mean, my father was a guidance counselor in Newport, Rhode Island, and had this on his
Wow.
for 30 years. And then he gave it to me. So I just want to, answer your question. I just had to go to school and get good grades, and was, fortunate enough to be a good enough athlete for, to get a partial scholarship. So I really, honestly, answer the question, I really never had to fight for myself. I really just kind of was able to excel based on, the talents that were provided to me and the opportunity provided me through a public school education.
I think there is an innate fighter in you because it's to describe the trajectory you're on in your career. You're skyrocketing right now. And you showed me that nameplate of your father. How much of your dad do you see in you?
A lot. I think, again, my dad was the director of guidance at Rogers High School in Newport, but I certainly see he could have easily been an executive in a corporation. He had certainly all the skills for that. So I think a lot of what I took from him in relationships and communications and talking to people, I got from my father. He was the first in his first in his family to graduate from college. He put himself through an MBA at Northeastern. So I think probably 70% of my success is probably based on just following my dad around and having that um, desire to communicate effectively with people and just be a good human.
What is being a good human? What does that look like for you?
Um, Try to lead by example. Look for the best in people. For, as a manager, it's you want to get the best out of your employees. You don't need to. There's certain managers that try and create a lot of stress and separate folks. I try to eliminate the stress and see how good people can perform when they're most comfortable. Um, yeah, I mean, I always think about when something goes wrong, what could I have done better first before I start pointing the finger at anyone else? I think my team hears me say that all the time. What could we have done better? Right? Let's replay it. Even if it was 2% our fault. How do what are the things that we could do better? So being a good human is, being humble, being nice, treating people how you should be treated. And I think a lot of that translates in the business as well. I mean, deals, I do a lot of deals. Deals are based on relationships.
Yeah.
Like when I tell people I do deals, I really do relationships. Like I meet people, I develop relationships with them, and then I get them to believe the truth that I'm looking for a deal that's beneficial to both of us. And once someone believes that the ultimate result is good for them and for you, getting deals done gets very simple, really. But there's a lot of that push and pull where someone might not believe what you're telling them to be accurate. They might think you have a hidden agenda. But really, just treat people how you want to be treated and develop a relationship. And if people believe that you have a mutual best interest, then things should flow really easily, to be honest.
You've built such an incredible network, and you were touching on the relationships. How about the relationship with yourself and how that's evolved through growing up, through college at Rhode Island, now at ESPN, and what you've gleaned from yourself as far as you being an evolved version of yourself?
I'm really just a product of the people who've supported me in my career. Like honestly, like I don't think that I'm wildly intelligent. I don't think I'm the greatest public speaker. I don't think I'm the most creative person. I certainly am all those things, but am I the best? No. The reason why I think I have the best job in the industry is because all the people that helped me along the way. I mean, I was, just a kid out of Rhode Island with a decent GPA, not a great one. And I got a job at the Big East Conference, and a bunch of old Italian guys who ran that conference look out for me and teach me the ropes. John Marinado, who recently just passed away, Michael Tranghese, former commissioner of the Big East, like they looked at me and said, "Hey, we should teach this kid what we know." And I'm not an Italian kid from the east side of Providence. I'm just a Cape Verdean kid from Portsmouth, Rhode Island, and they taught me the ropes. Tom Jackson,
Yes.
OJ, who taught me everything I need to know. And I joke with him. I say he taught me everything I need to go, and a lot of things I don't need to know about. Sometimes we got to sift through it. Yeah, I'm just a slightly above average in intelligence, but I made the most of the relationships and the people that helped me get there. And I won't name names at ESPN, but a long list of folks who provide me that opportunity. But so one asterisk on that story is when I
Yeah.
came to ESPN in 2008. I was waffling whether or not I should come to ESPN because I love working in college sports. And I sat down with Mike Tranghese, the former commissioner, and he goes, "Yeah, you should go there. There's, Burke Magnus is a really smart guy. He might be running a place in a couple of years." This is in 2008, mind you. And he's like, "You should go work for him, and help launch the ESPNU network and just learn from Burke. And then you could always come back or work somewhere else." And I've been here 15 years. And I remember when I left, Michael Tranghese called like 4 executives that he knew at ESPN. And he goes,
Wow.
"My guy is coming to ESPN. Make sure you take care of him." And so I'm not going to name names, but there would be a particular executive who doesn't work anymore. But he would always stop by my cube and he'd say the nicest things to me, and he would always help my career. And years later, I would talk to other people about that same executive, and they were like, "That guy was so mean to us. Like, why was he so nice to you?" And I'm like, I had a very different experience because I was vouched for. I was connected to the Big East and those executives that wanted me to have a good experience. So I feel like I've had the easy path because I've been sponsored and mentored by some of the best folks in the industry who always looked out for me. So I have like an obligation. I feel that I've had such a privileged path here. I have to make the most of it.
You're also being humble, which I wanted to hit on as well in this conversation, because as much as you've done and as much as people have helped you, as you've been talking about, there is a talent within you that few have. And if you're not going to say it, I'm going to say it. So that's part of the conversation here. Kevin Lopes is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. How does your mind work?
Uh, I'll put it in the context of business here. I've found in my career that if I hear about something or learn about something, I think my superpower is I can sift through the noise and I can disregard the things that might not be important, and I can pick out things that are important. And so in my career, I've done that a few times. Like I've done it with like internet delivery technology. I worked on Watch ESPN, the ESPN app, which was ESPN360.com. And very early on, I realized that like rolling uplink trucks for $4,000 to events was a lot of money. But the internet is a thing, and if we used it, we could significantly save production dollars. And so I leaned heavily into using IP encoders to deliver events, and that's helped ramp up, airing 100 events a year to 15,000 or 20,000 based on lowering the cost of production. And that technology early in my career was very new. Not people didn't think it was reliable, and I really pushed forward because I believed that even though it might have only been 98% accurate originally, it would always continually get better. And so that was a good strategic decision in my career. And then when I heard about what video games esports
Yeah.
was, I kind of realized, hey, this might be a thing, and let me pitch that to folks at work. And then, fast forward to now, like automated closed captioning, or OpenAI, ChatGPT, or new interesting AR technology. It's just sifting through what might be just something people are looking to make a quick buck on, right? Or underlying technology, I think is functionally important for the future of not only society but sports, and how that applies to ESPN. And so if that's one thing I can attempt to be less humble about, is not even necessarily creating it myself, but just being able to kind of say, you know what, I think like underlying blockchain technology, irregardless of the peaks and valleys of what NFTs are, but the underlying technology, how does that apply to business? How does that apply to sports? Like, how does AI apply to sports? And kind of point out that's a thing they should invest there. And so what I do now in innovation is, me and my team, we sit down and say, all right, where do we deploy the resources? You don't have an infinite number of resources. And so if I can be slightly more right than we are wrong about how to deploy those resources, I think it makes all of us more successful. And so, I appreciate the kind words, but I'm being humble for a reason, because, everyone's replaceable, and there's always a bigger fish. There's always someone who's smarter than you are. But if the one thing I can think back in my career, it's identifying new trends or technology, and then exploiting that on behalf of the company,
Where
or
do
really on
you,
behalf of fans.
for sure. And you mentioned your team that you have as well at ESPN. Where do you do your best thinking?
With at least three people sitting next to me. I think I do my best work where I can pace around a conference room, preferably in person, but Zoom happens sometimes, where I tell my team I have to stand up and pace around the room. But standing up and pacing around the room, throwing ideas off one to three people until the end result is where I think it would be much better for just me talking to myself. Um, you know, we have I hire diverse people, both diversity in every sense of the word, um, and so we all have a different perspective on things. And so when we get into a room, we just throw ideas at each other until we come up with something, and we're all nodding. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's do that.
So you're able to really brainstorm in what is a collaborative effort, and things are able to come out of that. What have you been most surprised or impressed in yourself, in your team, in the ideas that you put forward that have really gained a lot of traction?
The ideas, right? So I would say leaning into automation has gained a lot of traction quickly. A couple like AI is a big thing now, right? Because ChatGPT is, pretty awesome. But 4 years ago, I did a deal with a company to get automated previews and recaps on ESPN for sports that might not justify having a real human write a preview or recap. I did a deal 4 years ago on that. And then most recently, we partnered with Microsoft to help us automate closed captions, and that we rolled that out. We tested for 3 weeks, and then we rolled it out in the private testing publicly pretty quickly. And so I think automation and artificial intelligence was a quick ramp from testing to public. Um, and that really came out of the ESPN Innovation Center with our partners. And that was not years of R&D. That was a couple of weeks of R&D. And then we pushed that out. And that allows us to not only do the right thing and caption a lot more content, but at a significantly less cost than what it was to have a real human type into a computer. And quite frankly, we're doing so many events, it's impossible to have humans closed caption everything. There's just not enough people who do that type of work to caption all the content that we have. And so we need to lean into automation. So automation doesn't need to be a scary, it's replacing people's jobs thing. It's just helping us caption everything. We should caption everything that airs on ESPN, both for people who are hearing impaired, but also for people who might not be in a place or location that captions or audio works for them. And so we're not, replacing anyone. We're just doing better to serve the fan, um, to stretch out what we would have been able to do with a more reduced budget.
Let me leave you with this. My last question. Kevin Lopes is with me. I'm Bryan Fenley. Of course, Kevin, Vice President, Sports Business Development and Innovation at ESPN. I've done some volleyball broadcasting for ESPN. The idea and you were talking about the different innovations and the things that you're working on. When are you able to sort of deprogram? How
Um,
hard is that for you?
Honestly, I'll answer your question. I like to play golf. I mean, golf to me is like the best thing to do to relax and get away. During the pandemic, I played a lot of video games because I couldn't play golf. Well, I did play golf in the pandemic too. But the honest truth is, my job is really fun. Like, it's amazing. Like, it's not stressful. And I honestly wish that for everyone. Like, I talk to a lot of students and they say, "Oh, your job must be really cool." I'm like, "Yes, it is really cool. It actually is as cool as you think it is." And so I would, a lot of stress at work comes from who your direct manager is. I have the best boss in the world. Mark Walker, he's like the nicest person. He's done a ton of things in his career. He breaks walls down for me,
Hmm.
and he's amazing. I don't have any stress. I enjoy talking to my manager. Like, I can't wait to have the weekly call. Like, I enjoy talking to the people that work for me. I'm in the office 5 days a week. The second they let me back in after the pandemic, I was here 5 days a week. I just love what I do. I love who I work with. There's no stress that comes to my job. Doesn't mean it can be challenging sometimes. Absolutely. Like, does everything go our way all the time? It does not. But I don't really need to have all these stress reducing things in my life outside of work because I get so much pleasure from it. Um, but yeah, I occasionally get a massage. I go play golf, I take vacations. I do all those things. But I had a milestone birthday. I turned 40 somewhat recently, so I've been
Happy
in the
birthday.
industry. Thank you. This is my first job, as I'm trying to say. I've been in the industry long enough to know what it's like to be stressed about work, and I'm just so fortunate that I'm in a situation to, you know, not feeling like I need to blow off a bunch of steam when I get home.
Well, as we wrap up this conversation, you were talking about captions earlier, and I was just trying to think of a great caption that would describe this conversation and who you are. And the idea of how living a life with little stress and what it can do for somebody from a work perspective, and how that really has put you on this fast track to incredible success and so much more coming. And given that you are ahead of schedule with a lot of this technology, it's really fun to listen as well to the way in which your brain works. And I think we were able to extract a good amount of humility as well. Kevin Lopes, Vice President, Sports Business Development Innovation at ESPN. I'm Bryan Fenley. Kevin, thanks so much for letting us walk into your life and learn some new things about you that I'm sure even your closest colleagues are going to learn as well about you.
Probably. Thanks for the time. It was fun.